The hum of the Chicago high-rise's HVAC system was the only sound left on the 42nd floor. A low, mechanical drone that usually meant the building was asleep. I stood in the darkened hallway, adjusting the cuffs of my dark suit, mentally categorizing the offshore liabilities I had spent the last 9 hours untangling. The floor was supposed to be empty. Everyone else had cleared out by 7, abandoning the glass-walled perimeter to the nighttime cleaning crews. But as I rounded the corner toward the elevators, a sharp rectangle of golden light spilled out from the crack of the CEO's door. It was entirely out of sequence. Madeline Gardner never left her door open. I paused, the thick carpet absorbing the shift in my stance. I pushed the heavy oak door open just a few inches wider, stepping into the ambient glow of the city grid reflecting through the floor-to-ceiling windows. She was sitting on the floor, not in her ergonomic leather chair, not standing at the head of her sleek glass conference table, but physically on the carpet. Her back was pressed against the mahogany paneling of the desk drawers. Her blonde hair, which was usually pinned in a severe architectural style that commanded boardrooms, had fallen into loose, tired waves, resting over the collar of her white silk blouse. Her cream pencil skirt rode slightly up her knee as she sat with her legs crossed in a posture of utter defeat. She was holding a silver fountain pen, twirling it idly between her fingers. Her eyes, shadowed with the kind of exhaustion that sleep couldn't fix, lifted and found me filling the doorway. The silence stretched, thick with the smell of stale espresso and ozone from the running servers. "It's 11:45, I said, my voice steady, keeping the professional distance I was paid to maintain. I asked my boss why she was still at work at midnight. Madeline stopped twirling the pen. She let her wrist drop to her knee, her gaze never leaving my face. "I was waiting for you, Carter." That one sentence altered the gravity in the room. I stepped fully inside, letting the door click shut behind me. As an independent forensic accountant, my job was to walk into failing corporations, locate the financial rot, and surgically remove it. I dealt in ledgers, tax codes, and the cold, unfeeling reality of numbers. I did not deal in emotions. But looking at Madeline Gardner, a woman who had built this logistics empire from the ground up, a woman 6 years my senior, who usually moved with the force of a hurricane, I felt a sudden, profound need to shield her from the storm currently tearing at her foundation. "You shouldn't be on the floor," I said, moving toward the desk. "The chair felt too formal for a surrender," she murmured, a dry, bitter edge to her voice. She gestured with the pen toward a chaotic stack of manila folders scattered across the rug. "Marcus filed the internal complaint this afternoon. He bypassed compliance completely." Marcus, the rival board member who had been quietly acquiring voting shares for the past 6 months. He was an aggressive, impatient man who viewed Madeline's careful, ethical leadership as a weakness. I knelt slowly, the fabric of my trousers pulling tight, and picked up the top file. It was a drafted motion for a vote of no confidence, citing severe financial mismanagement and undocumented losses in the European division. It was a manufactured crisis, a paper trap designed to force her out of the company she founded. "This is a fabricated timeline," I said, scanning the dates. I kept my tone analytical, creating a wall of logic against her panic. "He's backdated these discrepancy reports to look like you ignored them for 3 quarters. It's a blatant violation of fiduciary protocol." "He has 3 board members already flipped, Carter," Madeline said, her voice dropping to a whisper. She pulled her knees slightly closer to her chest. "If I can't produce the verified audit trail by the quarterly meeting next Friday, the takeover clause in my founder's agreement activates. They strip my equity and lock me out of the building. I looked at her. Her hands were trembling, just a fraction, the silver pen vibrating against the silk of her skirt. The corporate world was entirely ruthless, and she had fought it alone for too long. My internal calculus shifted. I didn't just want to fix the books anymore. I wanted to dismantle Marcus's entire professional existence. "You aren't surrendering," I stated, placing the folder down and looking directly into her eyes. "We have 14 days. You hired me to find the truth, Madeline. I am going to find it, and we are going to use it to bury him." She let out a long, shaky exhale. The tension in her shoulders dropped a single inch. "He locked the primary server access, Carter. Executive privilege. I can't even get into my own historical data." "Then we rebuild it from the physical paper trail," I replied, standing up and offering her my hand. It was a functional gesture. I waited, giving her the choice to take it. Every digital lie leaves a physical shadow. Invoices, tax stamps, bank routing slips. If it exists, I will find it. But we don't do it sitting on the floor. Madeline stared at my hand for a long moment. Then, she reached up. Her fingers were cold. As I pulled her to her feet, the transfer of stability was immediate. I anchored my stance, absorbing her momentary imbalance until she was upright and steady. I stepped back instantly, establishing a safe radius. The quiet room felt less like a tomb and more like a bunker. Over the next 3 days, the executive suite transformed into a war room. The medical and work policy constraints of the firm dictated that any external auditor handling Tier 1 financial data had to be supervised by a senior partner at all times. Marcus had weaponized that rule, assuming it would paralyze me, since Madeline was locked in back-to-back crisis management meetings. Instead, it meant we spent every hour of the evening together, sealed in the high-rise after the staff departed. On Wednesday night, the air conditioning had been shut off by the building's automated ecosystem. The air in the conference room was stifling, smelling of warm electronics and old paper. I had my suit jacket draped over the back of a chair, my tie loosened, sleeves rolled to the elbow. I was deep into a complex reconciliation of the European transit accounts. "These shell ledgers are nested 3 layers deep," I muttered, dragging a highlighter across a printed spreadsheet. He used a rolling amortization schedule to hide the cash drain. It's actually quite elegant, in a completely fraudulent way. I tapped the paper with my pen, tracing the routing numbers. Here, he bypassed the main corporate account and funneled the deficit through a dummy LLC in Delaware. Madeline was sitting across the glass table, nursing a cup of lukewarm tea. I watched her rub her left temple, a microtell I had quickly learned meant a migraine was setting in. "Can you prove he authorized the transfers?" she asked, her voice raspy from a day of arguing with nervous investors. "I don't need his signature on the transfer," I explained, maintaining a calm pedagogical rhythm. "I just need the IP log from the server handshake when the LLC was registered. If the timestamp matches his swipe card access in the building, the circumstantial weight is enough to trigger a federal compliance hold. It freezes the board vote." She looked at me, a genuine expression of relief washing over her tired features. "You make it sound so simple." "It is simple. It's just math and human error," I said. I stood up, walked over to the climate control panel on the wall, and manually overrode the system, dropping the temperature by 4 degrees. I didn't announce it. I just knew she hated the heat when her head hurt. I returned to the table and began organizing the stacks of paper into neat, aligned rows. "You need to go home, Madeline. It's past 1 in the morning." "I can't," she replied, gesturing to the sprawling mess of documents. "The supervision mandate. If compliance finds out you were in here alone with the files, Marcus will invalidate the entire audit." I looked at the files, then at the deep circles under her eyes. She was running on adrenaline and fear, and both were toxic in high doses. I couldn't change the corporate rules, but I could manage the environment. "Then you sleep here," I said quietly, pointing to the long, leather Chesterfield sofa in the corner of her office. "I will sit at the desk. I won't cross the threshold of the conference room without waking you. But if you don't sleep, you are going to misread a contract tomorrow, and we can't afford that." Madeline hesitated, her pride fighting her exhaustion. She was so used to being the shield for everyone else that the concept of resting while someone else stood guard was entirely foreign to her. "I'll be right here," I added, my tone leaving no room for negotiation. "I handle the ledgers. You handle staying sharp." She finally nodded, a tiny, fractured movement. She walked over to the sofa, slipping off her heels, and lay down, pulling her suit jacket over her shoulders like a blanket. I walked back to the desk, pulled a spare wool throw from the bottom drawer that I had noticed earlier in the week, and quietly draped it over her. I didn't linger. I walked back to my workstation, placed my phone face down on the glass to eliminate distractions, and turned on a single, low-wattage desk lamp. The silence of the room was heavy, but it wasn't empty. It was filled with the steady rhythm of her breathing. I spent the next 4 hours cross-referencing thousands of line items, my eyes burning, my neck stiff. I wanted to stop. I wanted to close the laptop. But every time I looked over and saw her sleeping, the exhaustion evaporated. I turned my longing into discipline. I couldn't hold her. I couldn't fix the past that had made her so guarded. But I could fix this spreadsheet. By 5:30 a.m., when the sky over Lake Michigan turned a bruised purple, I had the complete, unassailable chain of custody for the stolen funds. I had removed the stress from her tomorrow. The shift happened on a rainy Tuesday, 8 days before the scheduled board vote. I was standing by the floor-to-ceiling window, drinking black coffee and watching the raindrops distort the city traffic below. Madeline was at her desk, reviewing the executive summary I had prepared. We had found a rhythm, a quiet partnership built on unspoken trust and shared competence. The heavy oak door swung open without a knock. Marcus strode in, flanked by David from compliance and 2 external auditors wearing identical gray suits. Marcus was a man who weaponized his presence, projecting loud, aggressive confidence. He slapped a thick legal document down on the center of Madeline's desk. "Good morning, Madeline," Marcus said, his voice booming in the quiet room. "We're accelerating the timeline. The emergency board session is convened for tomorrow morning at 9. Furthermore, compliance has authorized a surprise, immediate audit of your personal communications regarding the European accounts." Madeline froze, her hand hovering over her keyboard. The color drained from her face. Tomorrow morning. We were still missing the final bank verifications from Delaware. "You can't move the vote without a 2/3 majority consensus," Madeline said, her voice tight, fighting to maintain her authority. "I secured the votes an hour ago," Marcus smiled, a cold, predatory expression. "And these gentlemen are here to confiscate your hard drives. Step away from the desk." The air in the room vanished. I saw Madeline's fingers grip the edge of the mahogany desk so hard her knuckles turned white. It was an ambush. He was trying to panic her into making a mistake, publicly, in front of compliance. I set my coffee cup down on the windowsill. The clink of the ceramic was unnaturally loud. I walked slowly across the room, placing myself deliberately between Marcus and Madeline's desk. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. "You are welcome to the hard drives, David," I said, addressing the head of compliance, completely ignoring Marcus. However, under Section 4, Paragraph B of the firm's data retention policy, the confiscation of executive hardware during an active external forensic audit requires a countersigned warrant from the independent investigator. I paused, letting the silence stretch. Which is me, and I do not consent. Marcus's face darkened. You are a hired contractor, Dunn. You don't dictate policy here. I kept my hands loosely at my sides, projecting total, relaxed authority. I dictate the integrity of the audit, Marcus. If you break the chain of custody by seizing these drives without my authorization, I will file an immediate injunction with the SEC, citing witness tampering and evidence spoliation. You will spend the next 3 years in federal deposition before you ever see the inside of a boardroom again. I watched David from compliance swallow hard, shifting his weight. He was a rule follower, and I had just quoted the rules better than he could. Is this true? David asked Marcus nervously. Marcus glared at me, his jaw working. I didn't blink. I simply waited, an immovable object. I proved my truth with measurable reality, and the bluff collapsed. Fine, Marcus spat. Keep the drives. It won't matter tomorrow morning at 9 when the board fires you, Madeline. He turned on his heel and marched out, David and the auditors trailing behind him like scolded dogs. When the door clicked shut, the silence that followed was fragile. I turned around. Madeline was still gripping the desk, her breathing shallow and fast. The facade of the untouchable CEO had cracked. Hey, I said quietly, stepping closer but maintaining a respectful distance. She stood up abruptly, pacing toward the window, wrapping her arms around her own waist. It's gone, Carter. He has the votes. Even with your spreadsheet, without the final bank stamps, the board won't care. They just want the bleeding to stop. He's going to take everything I've built. She stopped by the glass, resting her forehead against the cold pane. A single, quiet sob caught in her throat. It was the sound of a woman who had carried the world until her knees finally buckled. I walked over and stopped 2 feet behind her. I didn't offer empty platitudes. I didn't tell her it would be okay. I took my phone out of my pocket, placed it face down on the small table nearby, and gave her my absolute, undivided attention. Madeline, I said, my voice low, creating a sudden stillness in the room. Look at me. She turned, her eyes bright with unshed tears, her defenses entirely stripped away. I am not going to let him take your company, I stated, the words heavy and absolute. But you have to trust me. Can you do that? She looked at my face, searching for a crack, a doubt. Finding none, she let out a shaky exhale. Yes, I trust you. She stepped forward, just a fraction of an inch, closing the gap. I didn't reach for her waist. I didn't pull her in. I simply lifted my hand and placed it firmly on her shoulder. The touch was grounding, a physical anchor in the middle of a storm. I felt the fine tremor in her frame slowly subside as my calm flowed into her panic. The chaotic noise of the threat faded, replaced by the quiet certainty of partnership. Good, I said softly. Now, sit down. We have to rewrite the battlefield. The next 12 hours were a masterclass in tactical exhaustion. If Marcus wanted a board meeting at 9, we would give him one. But I wasn't going to fight him on the floor with incomplete ledgers. I was going to change the rules of the game. I dug into the corporate charter, scanning hundreds of pages of legalese while Madeline drafted a defense of her operational decisions. By 8 a.m. the next morning, my eyes felt like they were filled with sand. My suit was wrinkled, and the coffee in my cup had turned to sludge. Madeline was sitting beside me, reviewing the final printed packet. "This is a massive risk, Carter," she said, tracing the edge of the paper. "If this clause doesn't hold up—" "It will hold up," I replied, organizing the folders. "It's ironclad. I verified the precedent at 4 a.m. You just have to deliver it." At 8:55 a.m., we walked into the primary boardroom. It was a cavernous space of glass and steel, filled with 12 board members in bespoke suits, murmuring in low, serious tones. Marcus sat at the head of the table, looking incredibly pleased with himself. Madeline walked to the opposite end of the table. She didn't look tired. She looked like a monarch returning to reclaim a stolen throne. She wore a sharp navy suit, her posture flawless. I took a seat against the back wall, the designated spot for external consultants. I was her shield, but this was her arena. "Let's bring this to order," Marcus announced, slamming a folder onto the table. "We are here to vote on the immediate termination of Madeline Gardner as managing partner, citing gross financial negligence." "Before the vote is called," Madeline interjected, her voice ringing clear and steady across the polished wood. She didn't wait for permission. She opened her leather portfolio and began sliding copies of our documentation down the table. "I am submitting the independent forensic audit conducted over the past 2 weeks. It details a systematic, multi-million-dollar embezzlement scheme hidden within the European transit accounts." The board members frowned, opening the packets. "These are fabricated excuses," Marcus scoffed, leaning forward. "A desperate attempt to deflect blame. The deficit is real, and it happened under your watch." "The deficit is real," Madeline agreed calmly. She looked directly at Marcus. "Because you created it." The room went dead silent. "On page 4 of the audit," Madeline continued, her command of the room absolute, "you will find the routing numbers for a Delaware LLC. On page 5, you will find the IP logs linking the creation of that LLC to Marcus's private terminal in this building. And on page 6, you will find the final, verified bank stamps proving that Marcus authorized the transfer of corporate funds into his own private holding company." She produced the final receipts, the ones we had secured at the very last minute, and placed them in the center of the table. It was a flawless execution of evidence. She didn't yell. She didn't accuse with emotion. She revealed his manipulation with undeniable reality. Marcus's face turned a mottled red. "This is absurd. This data is illegally obtained. I demand to see the chain of custody." I stood up from my chair against the wall. Every eye in the room snapped to me. "The chain of custody is documented in Appendix B," I said, my voice calm, projecting pure professional indifference to his anger. "Every byte of data was secured under federal compliance standards. I am a licensed forensic investigator, Marcus. I don't guess. I measure." Marcus scrambled, flipping through the charter document on his tablet. "It doesn't matter. I have the proxy votes. I move to terminate her immediately, based on a loss of majority confidence. Call the vote." "You can't call the vote, Marcus," I said, stepping forward. I leaned over the table, tapping a specific paragraph on the corporate charter in front of him. I read the contract fast, and I had caught the trap he overlooked. Under Section 9, Clause C of the Founders' Agreement, any board member currently under active investigation for financial fraud by an independent auditor loses all voting rights and proxy privileges until the investigation concludes. I looked around the room, meeting the eyes of the other board members. I officially opened that investigation at 8 a.m. this morning. Marcus's shares are frozen. He has no vote. The silence in the boardroom was absolute. The scrapped contract, the hostile takeover, it all dissolved into dust under the weight of pure, methodical logic. The board members shifted away from Marcus, the alliance crumbling in real time. "This meeting is adjourned," Madeline stated, closing her portfolio with a decisive snap. She didn't gloat. She simply took her company back. 2 hours later, Marcus was escorted from the building by security, his access badges revoked pending federal charges. The adrenaline slowly drained out of the high-rise, leaving behind a quiet, profound peace. I was packing my laptop into my leather briefcase in the corner office. The job was done. The contract was fulfilled. Technically, I had no reason to stay. Madeline walked in. She had taken her suit jacket off, looking relaxed for the first time since I had met her. "Compliance wants the final hard copies by Friday," she said, leaning against the door frame. "I'll have them couriered," I replied, clicking my briefcase shut. I felt a sudden, heavy tightness in my chest. The crisis was over, which meant the proximity was over. I had maintained my distance out of respect, turning my hunger into discipline. But looking at her now, the restraint felt agonizing. "Carter?" she said softly. I looked up. She walked across the room, stopping directly in front of me. She didn't look like a CEO right now. She looked like a woman who had finally found a place to rest. "You don't have to leave," she said, her voice dropping to a quiet register that was meant only for me. "My audit is complete, Madeline," I said, forcing the words out, giving her the easiest exit if she wanted it. "You're safe now." "I know I'm safe," she replied, her eyes holding mine with a steady, fierce clarity. "But I don't want you to be my auditor anymore." She reached out and rested her hand flat against my chest, right over my tie. The physical contact was a sudden arrival, a destination reached after a long, exhausting journey. It wasn't a spark of electricity, it was a heavy, grounding certainty. The world stopped spinning. I looked down at her hand, then up at her face. I didn't rush. I didn't pull her into a frantic embrace. I placed my hand over hers, holding it there, locking the promise in place. "Are you sure?" I asked, my voice low. "I'm not exactly easy. I'm pedantic, I work too much, and I obsess over details." A small, genuine smile broke across her face. "I'm counting on it." I leaned down and kissed her. It was exactly one kiss, gentle and absolute. There was no desperation in it, only the profound relief of a heavy burden being lifted. It felt like dropping an anchor in a safe harbor. It was a seal on a promise, a shared silence that blocked out the noise of the entire city below us. 3 weeks later, the Chicago logistics community held its annual charity gala at the Drake Hotel. The ballroom was a sea of tuxedos and evening gowns, buzzing with industry gossip and champagne toasts. I stood near the edge of the room, holding 2 glasses of sparkling water, watching Madeline navigate a circle of investors. She wore a stunning emerald gown, radiating a quiet, unshakable power. She was entirely in her element, and I felt a deep surge of pride watching her command the space. A senior partner from a rival firm approached her, a man known for being patronizing to female executives. I took a step forward, my protective instincts flaring, ready to intervene. But I stopped. I watched Madeline politely but firmly dismantle the man's condescending remark with a single, sharp statistic, leaving him speechless. She didn't need me to fight her battles. She never had. She just needed someone to watch her back so she could fight them herself. She caught my eye across the room, excused herself from the circle, and walked straight toward me, ignoring the whispers of the crowd. "Having fun?" I asked, handing her a glass. "More than I expected," she smiled. She turned to face the room, then deliberately slipped her hand in mine. She didn't hide the gesture. She didn't try to be discreet. She wove her fingers through mine, a public, undeniable choice, in front of her peers, her rivals, and her industry. Everyone is staring, I noted quietly, my thumb resting against the back of her hand. Let them, Madeline replied, leaning her shoulder lightly against mine. I want them to know exactly who is standing next to me. You know that feeling when you spend your whole life trying to control every variable, thinking that if you just hold on tight enough, the world won't fall apart? I lived in that space for a long time. But looking back now, I realize something profound. Love isn't about holding on tight. It's about knowing they will come back if you let go. Real partnership isn't about rescuing someone from their life. It's about creating a safe place where they can gather the strength to rescue themselves. It's about the quiet consistency of showing up, day after day, and proving that they don't have to carry the heavy things alone. Please like and subscribe so we can share more stories like this.